Hello, everybody. I think we'll get started now. Right, this talk is Go for Perl Programmers, a 30-minute tour, last chance to go to an actual Perl talk. First things very first, this is not an evangelical talk. I don't want to talk anybody into using Go or anything else, because this is a Perl conference, so we start from the standpoint that Perl is the best language in the world. Can we hear an amen?
So this is a NODDY enemy talk?
Computers are the enemy. When they rise up. I'm Sue Spence. That's my Twitter and GitHub ID, which are eerily the same. And my email address, I will publicize where I put these slides and what code I have after the talk, because I'll put them on GitHub. So anyway, let's get started. What is Go? Anybody here not know what Go is? Good, we actually have some people. That's a gopher, by the way, it's not Go. Go is this language, and I've got some trivia about it. So it's a general purpose programming language. It's really mostly used for system programming, except when it isn't. So it was invented at Google by those three people, two of whom you probably heard of before, especially if you've ever done any C programming. That's Robert Greisemer, who's the guy who actually started this project, and then Rob Pike and Ken Thompson horned in on it because they came over to Google from Bell Labs, I believe. So it's a reboot of C and C++. Not any other language, even though I've occasionally heard Go advocates tell me that, you know, yeah, it's really against Python or Java or somebody else, because they're too complicated and stuff, but it isn't. Whoop. Well, that worked well. So, the 1.0 released in 2009, that's 2 years after they think they started the project. So 1.0, and now it's at 1.6. I call that the stable, even though 1.7 was released a week ago. And my Twitters and email were all full of that. And of course, the team adopted a gopher mascot for the 1.0 release. Would you ask why? I didn't ask why, but somebody told me that it's actually Rob Pike's wife draws them. So that's why there's gophers everywhere. So, Perl, we know Perl's symbols, they're lovely. Camels, butterflies, onions. So Go has this one mascot, but lots of drawings of it. A lot of them done by the same person, René French, who is the originator of it. I actually asked the author, or the person who took this picture, for his permission to use it. It's Brad Fitzpatrick, some of you may have heard of him as well, who is still, I think, pines after the days when he was a happy Perl programmer, before he went to the enemy. So, Perl, loads of killer apps. Who remembers that page? Oh, I remember it. Oh, good old days. So, I mean, text processing, that was the first thing that everybody said Perl was great at, and it was, and still is. So the web, I don't know, that's just a little thing that some people use. And essentially an awful lot of apps, particularly in the 90s, a lot of them are still around, some of them have gone by the wayside, but it is still so ubiquitous that it's like water. People still don't realize just how much Perl there is in the world. So it's been around a good long time, as we know. I know technically the ladies, but let's just say 1990s to present, and used by pretty much everyone for some value of it. I've never worked anywhere that didn't have Perl. Go's only had its first killer app for 2 years. But if you talk to the Go people, it's all Docker, 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 Docker. So the client there is really the cloud, but it is such a major hype deal for the Go community that it's just, you see people wearing Docker scarves and Docker shirts, and it's just, they're really happy, and I'm happy for them because they have a killer app instead of just loving the language. So This language, just like all the languages, except Perl, because this is a Perl conference, but really there are no magic beans for sale. We're not doing anything here that you can't do in other ways, some better, some worse, in all other languages. And as I said, you don't have to, Perl's everywhere. It's part of the base installation for pretty much every open source operating system that I can think of. But Go isn't. It's not, because it's still, even though it had its 1.0 6 years ago, nobody's packaging it yet that I'm aware of. And if they did, it would be 3 releases out of date. So Google does try to help you out there. That's their, many of you may have already looked at this because you had people telling you that Go was the best language in the world. So it has one of these sandboxed things you can try. If you see that where it says hello world in that corner there, they actually have a lot of different apps, small apps that you can look at. There's Game of Life and Fibonacci done concurrently and all sorts of things there, just for demo purposes. The tour actually takes you on just basically learn the basics of Go. When it's quite a good tutorial introduction to the language, and it's zero cost because as long as you have an internet connection. Could we get more out of Google? I suppose. Underneath the sandboxed try the Go stuff is this playground, which showcases one of the Go community's hang-ups, which is formatting. They're a bit like Python that way. More about that later. So you can press the button. You can mess up the formatting of whatever program you've cut and pasted in there, and then press the format button. It'll clean it up for you. You get a shareable URL there too. So runnable paste bin. They claim that they're going to save those URLs that they give you forever, but who here misses Google Reader? However, that's been for several years now they've said that, and I actually gave a patch to somebody with a package, and I was just giving them some cleaned up tutorial information, and the guy said, "Well, that's great." He says, "I'll just put it on the Go Playground, and I'll put a link in the code to that." And I was like, "Okay," but anyway, there is a third-party open source alternative to the Go Playground. It is glot.io. Has anybody seen that? That's really cool. It does Perl 5, Perl 6, Python, everything. It's really cool. Also, installing Go is extremely easy. So all the major operating systems are covered. You get source because it is an open source language. You don't need to set Go root unless you decide to install outside the default location. Put the default location in your path when you're set. It really is that easy because they have binaries available for probably most purposes, and it builds on an awful lot of other platforms. They have a concept of a workspace so that you can organize your code. So, apologies for the lovely graphic, but basically, the only one they really need to care about making yourself is need to make a Go path, which is whatever you want your base development area to be, and then make a source, and then in my case it's GitHub, but if you use something like GitLab or something like that, I think a lot of the public repository systems are covered, but definitely GitHub. So, and then your GitHub ID, and then the name of your application or repo. Go toolchain. Go toolchain's different from the Perl toolchain in the sense that, actually I'm getting ahead of myself, but anyway, you just use Go. They have the Go command is overused, but it does make sense. So running a Perl program, one of the basic baby ways to do it. Most of us probably don't do this, but Perl program.pl. For Go, you type go run py.go, and then Go looks just like an interpreted language. Only I'm sorry to say it's faster. If we wanted something akin to CPAN, getting a CPAN module, because the Go community does not have a CPAN. I don't actually know of any other community that really does. Node sort of does, but I mean, I still say CPAN is preeminent in the world for collection of modules for a language, but in this case, they just assume you're going to go get it, and it understands how to get things from whichever, assuming you've got your access to, say, GitHub already set up as a developer, then if you type go get and then a package name with, github.com user ID, name of the package, it will just go get it for you and stick it in your workspace. And I'll show you that in a minute. So it's go this, go that. So go build will create an executable for you and put it in your current directory. Go install will put it in the bin directory that I showed there. It'll stick it in there for you. Go version tells you what version you're on. And back to their obsession, they have a Go format, because they're very picky about the way code looks. Which is actually fine to me, because as long as I can look at it the way I want to look at it in my own editor, and then just run it as part of a workflow that goes through the formatting program, so that I don't hear an earful of abuse from other people, either my colleagues or other people that look at it, then you don't have to worry about it. So, okay, as we know, in the Perl world, toolchain means how to install modules. In Go, that's how to make the executable program. Because this is the other thing that has people, at least in DevOps, really thrilled, is the fact that you get to deploy static binaries. They were actually really loath to even add the capability of creating shared objects to the Go compiler, because when you make static binaries, it's just going to work when you give it to somebody, as long as they put it on the right platform, which you're probably going to do. And so the burden is on developers for taking care of dependencies, whereas I think with Perl, and not just Perl, Python and other languages of this type, which is most of them, we have to share the burden of installation with whoever takes our code, which is quite often some sort of DevOps person who has to make sure that all the dependencies are right. And this is another reason why it's difficult to give Perl, Python, and whatever programs to just random people to run, because they will have to maintain all sorts of dependencies. Another thing about Go, they love to tout the fact that it's extremely minimal. The number of keywords is very similar to that of C, which is around 24, I think, is C. And that's all of them. There are number 37, actually, pre-declared names, which are names that are not reserved by the compiler. You can use them as long as they don't conflict with sensible use of, and I think it would be silly to use them any other way, but you can. So these are the type names, the 4 constants that are pre-declared, and a handful of functions that are pre-declared for you because they're part of the language. It does have a strong standard library. It's maintained basically by the might of Google. People outside Google can make pull requests against it, but you'll have to go, you'll have to abide by Google's rules for that. You probably have to sign something in blood, but if anybody's ever tried to make a change to a code base, like say something under OpenBSD, they'll know that Google isn't the only one that can be difficult. In fact, I've met people who have made changes to Google packages, whereas I had to have something against OpenSSH, and it's never going to get applied. Very strongly typed, C, C++, Java, that's all, these languages are like that. But they tried to make it easier. So there is some syntactic sugar that makes it slightly easier to deal with the fact that you have to dot your I's and cross your T's with types. It's international by nature, as is Perl 6. Perl 6 is actually a little better that way, but it is true that Pike and Thompson were, I think, the originators of the UTF-8 spec, so it would be kind of bad if the language didn't follow it. It's garbage collected. Lightweight object orientation with no inheritance. Actually, I'm even going to say something stronger in a minute about that. But another thing, dead code cannot happen. This is very different from Perl, say. And when I say dead code, I mean you can't even have a package that you're including that you don't use. It will just refuse to compile it. That's actually quite annoying until you get used to it. You will have to get really good at commenting things out. But they just don't allow it because they just think it's too big of a code smell, and they were too tired of dealing with code in Google's own code bases that they just think it's too messy. So, as I've mentioned, they're bossy about formatting, and tabs won. So, all right, tabs. Who's tabs here? Yeah, you're in a minority. Spaces. Sorry. But again, you can do whatever you want in your own editor. Just run it through Go format. So. Maps and slices, not quite what you're used to. Slices are fairly similar. They are pieces of an array, but it's a little bit more difficult. It's like falling off a log to refer to a slice of a Perl array. You hardly even notice you're doing it. They're a little more picky, but at least they know about slices. I can't think of many languages. Maybe Python. I don't really know Python that well. Maps are what we call hashes, or associative arrays, but they've made it to the modern world. They've got closures. How long has Perl 5 had them? Long time. And it has concurrent programming support, which if you talk to Go people will tell you is the best thing ever. I still think concurrent programming is hard, but at least it makes it easier to get started with it, as does Perl 6. I still think Perl 6 is pretty cool. I know I said lightweight object orientation. I'm actually going to say it's not an object-oriented language at all. Does anybody find that weird in 2016, that there would be a major language that people would use that isn't OO, really? Pascal. Pascal. No, okay. Yeah, but C's old. Come on, C's really old. C++ was supposed to be taking care of all that, right? So anyway, they deliberately, it's got no objects or classes. Oops, double. There's no inheritance whatsoever. It's all, it's done by composition, which is, again, I think, Perl 6 is like that. Moose is a bit like that, but Perl, I think, again, the Perl churches do what you want to do. Want to have inheritance that's, in a diamond or any other gemstone, feel free, but they just don't have it because, again, that's been a minefield for C++ for years, at least in their eyes. So methods are defined on types, and they look just like function calls, except there's a pointer to a type that prefaces it, so that you can put together your non-objects and your non-classes. Because if you look at those reserved words again, you don't see class or object there anywhere. Certainly not class. And that's pretty much what you get. Well, that's pretty much what Go's doing, so I guess that's not surprising. Okay, so if I were going to rely on the network, and which I'm not going to, because I saw too many people fail to do that today, but you can run that, works perfectly well. Okay, I said code, but the only two things you kind of have to learn to get started is that Go code, all of it starts with a package statement, not just modules like Perl 5. So if you say package main, standalone program, otherwise it's in a namespace. And it's got an import statement just like Perl 5. Use this. And yes, if you don't put them in alphabetical order, which Go format now does, then people whine about it. There's actually an import list button on the Go playground so that you can tick that so that it will reorder them for you. Okay. All right, a few weeks ago, Steve Mionat was working on his Perl 6 talk, and he said, I want to do some simple benchmarking, and I don't want to do it in Perl because I don't want any accusations that something's bent in either Perl 6 or Perl 5, basically. So he said, why don't you write me one? And I said, yeah, okay. So, sorry. So I wrote one. This actually didn't take me very long. It takes a varying number of arguments, but essentially it's just the number of times you want to run the program and the name of the program, and optionally any arguments. So it's not real benchmarking, but I called it bench anyway. So package OS has a lot of useful things like command line arguments. That's where it sticks them. So check for that. Do we have those? Iterations are convert. You have to. Here's one of the things where you see that it's more annoying than Perl 5 and any other Perl, is I have to actually convert the first argument, which is a number of iterations, which I want to be an integer, so I have to, because the arguments, you're past them as strings, so I had to convert them, but it's not too difficult. And you can find lots of boilerplate out there, so anyway, in less than 50 lines, I've got something that will do what I wanted to do, so. So let's say 10 times Unix 101 here. People keep telling me that Perl 5 is slow, but that program does 5 million iterations on this little error. It's a Taylor series to compute pi, I believe. And it does it in less than 2 seconds. I think that's not too bad, really. So anyway, that was the work of a couple of hours to do, at most. To me, it was like writing a script. I didn't have to do anything really special that I wouldn't do if I were writing a Perl 5 script or even a bash script or anything else. It's just, and I can run it without compiling it or installing it anywhere, so that's just a thing. So again, even for a compiled language, this is really a compiled language, because behind the scenes it does compile, it creates objects and puts them somewhere, calls a linker, links it, does all the things that compiled languages do, which is why I got sick of doing them a long time ago, and wanted to do things like Perl. Hello. So anyway, I did that with Perl as well. So I've showed you the Perl, just the output of the Perl one there. But what I did was I first wrote this program in Go because I was learning Go. I already knew how to do Perl, more or less. Great. Sorry. So I wrote this program in Go first that does, as I said, 5 million iterations of a Taylor series to compute a basic value of pi. And it seems to be, it's good to about 9 decimal places, which I think is close enough for government work. And so there it is. Despite the fact that this is a strongly typed language, there are only 2 mentions, it's less than 20 lines long. There are only 2 mentions of types in this program, because you can use what they call their short form of a variable declaration to let it guess what the type is, which most of the time, let's face it, is fairly obvious. If I set n to 5 million and there's no decimal point, then it's an integer. I had to, because I wanted the delta value here to be a floating point number, I had to cast the integer to float, but all that changing a value is very much, it's a lot like C, only it's kind of more obvious in a way. If I surround the variable name with the type I want it to be, I think that's fairly obvious. Sum it up, do the final calculation, and then you're done. So it didn't really pick my nits about type very much, which was one of the things I was worried about when I first started looking at Go. So when I wanted to compare this with a Perl program written in Perl 5, all I did was translate it by putting $signs in front of it and getting rid of anything that mentioned any type, which was 2 things. It's the exact same logic, and just for fun, see if I can find it. There's the golf version. Which runs about the same speed as the non-golf version, so I did find that funny. When I went looking for, because I knew there's golf versions of everything because people have been playing Perl golf for as long as I can remember. And the first one I found was somebody on a Stack Overflow had put this exact program on there and said, "What does this do? How does it work?" And I will refer you to Stack Overflow for the rest of that. But anyway, so if I run the benchmark on this, and I can do this, so nobody, not that anybody's going to accuse me of cheating, but so that's how fast it runs ungolfed. That's actually running quite a bit slower than I expected. I'm surprised, but let's just do. I seem to remember checking this, and it was roughly the same. So this is not the case. So don't play golf, kids. "89 milliseconds for the Go version, but they cheat, it's compiled. Which is quite a bit faster, on the order of, it's about the same. Let's do that. Oh, that's right, thank you, I was going to do that. I think it does. It's a bit slower, as you can imagine, but it's still a third the time it takes to run in Perl 5. So, but then again, if I were doing something like that, I could probably wait a second. You know, this is why I think it's great that people work on performance improvements, but we shouldn't lose sight of the fact that actually Perl 5 on modern hardware is still pretty fast. And I don't remember really ever having a problem that I couldn't solve with software architecture or other scaling measures like adding message queues and things like that. So anyway. I have some NODDY concurrency demos. Does anybody want to see those? NODDY means simple. NODDY is a little puppet. It's for little kids, so, and that works for my brain. Yeah, pretty much. But NODDY's really cute, so. I'm having demoitis. Wake up. Go routines. Yet another overload of the word go. So this is about as simple as it gets to show the this Go routines are lightweight threads managed by Go's runtime, and that's all I'm going to say about that. So where it says Go message, it will spin off a thread to run the function message there, and all that does is print what I'm going to show you now. Yay. And I had to cheat to do that. I put in a sleep so that it shows you this. If I don't put the sleep in there, then the main function message at the top there gets displayed, and the program terminates before the Go routines finish. So it is kind of sort of low bar to entry for concurrency. So I think that's a fair statement. But on the other hand, don't believe any of them who say, oh, it's really simple and it's really easy, you don't need locks or anything like that, because they're lying. That's not true. And not here. I watched a really great talk a week ago. See if I can find it. Yeah. Can't type. By this chap, Nicholas Ng, because in fact concurrency is a hard problem. Okay, we're done. Thanks.